Okay, we're going to create the arm, and we're only going to do this on one side and then mirror over the other side. It saves us a lot of time and keeps everything fairly balanced. If you notice here on my template, my arms are sticking straight out and my legs are sticking straight down. There's a reason for that, because it allows us to rig the model in a more efficient and also in a way that's a lot easier to select certain parts to fit to our joints without having any problems. And you'll see that when we get to rigging this robot. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to be creating this in sections. So we're going to have a cylinder, a rectangle, another cylinder that's been rotated, another rectangle. We're going to leave the hand for last, so we'll be coming back to that. So let's get started with the arm here, and as you can see, it does go in with another rectangle in. We're going to start with the cylinder. So go up to your parametric primitives, select a cylinder, and we want to have that facing us on the, and as you can see right now in this case, it's on the positive Z axis, but this joint here is actually rotating on the X axis here. So orientation positive Z, and now we're going to shrink it down just a bit. I'm going to just put in kind of some arbitrary numbers and then we'll size it a little bit later. And height about 10. Again, I'm going to click and drag here, pull it up there. So you can see we need to make it a little bit larger. Let's try 15. And the thickness looks pretty appropriate for right now. We can change that based upon what we need. As you can see here, my head's kind of in the way of the rest of the body. So I'm going to use these two and the perspective mode to kind of guide where this should actually be placed. All right. Now let's label that cylinder shoulder. Click return. Now that we have that, we can make adjustments to that later if necessary here in the attributes of that. Last thing I'm going to do is make the rotation segments here 12. We don't need that much detail. We'll mainly be seeing it from far away, so lessens the polygon count, and that allows us a little bit more speed in rendering. Right, let's create the upper arm now. We're going to create another cube. And in this cube, you can see it's quite gigantic. We need to get it down, scaled down to this size. So what I want to do first is I'm going to orientate the axis of this cube kind of right there in the middle. And I use both of these to bring it kind of right in the middle of where my arm is here. And in this case, where the shoulder is. Now we're going to scale this down on the y-axis. I'm going to go over to the Attributes Manager and just pull down, and then on this axis right here, the x-axis, we're just going to scale it down, and just so there's just a little bit of a crease right here where it meets the shoulder, and where it meets the elbow. We have to do a little bit of adjustment to move it over a bit. Bring that in, and one more time. That looks pretty good. All right. The last thing to see is it's pretty darn wide. We don't want our arm to be that wide. So we're going to take the z-axis, bring it in, and this is where I'm going to kind of use my judgment, looking at the top menu up here to think about the thickness. Again, we can always make this a little bit thicker if necessary later. All right, so we're going to label this cube upper arm. All right. And now what we're going to do is create the elbow. And to do that, we're just going to take our shoulder, hold down Control on the keyboard. I'm going to click and drag it up. And you can see it relevels the shoulder. I want to make a duplicate of it, basically. I'm going to drag it over in the front display window. And its axis, as you can see in the drawings here, is facing up. So, positive Y. And that allows that to rotate on that elbow, like an elbow would rotate. I'm going to create a little bit more thickness on this. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm going to go ahead and give it 15 and take a look at that. And it looks pretty good. We're going to leave that at 15. And we're going to label this elbow. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and click on my shoulder and increase the height of that also, just to kind of thicken a little bit. We'll come back and make some modifications later to those. Right, the last thing that we need to do is create the forearm. Same thing we did with the shoulder. We're going to use the upper arm rectangle. Click on control, click and hold on control, drag up, make a duplicate of the upper arm, and we're just going to label this lower arm. And again, on my naming conventions, you notice I capitalize the first and the second word, but I have no space in between. That's just what I use. You can use whatever you like. It's just something I always like to use. So it makes it easy for me to see what it is I'm working with. I'm going to drag it out on the x-axis. So I'm going to go here in the top menu, drag it out so there's just a little bit of space between the two. And now that I have the arm positioned, I'm going to look at it a little bit closer here. And that looks pretty good. All right, I'll finish those spaces with some smaller rectangles in between to make them look a little bit more like they're connected. The last thing we need to do is bring a rectangle from the shoulder cylinder into the rotational cup of the model. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a copy here of the lower arm. And as you notice, I'm dragging it down this time because it comes before the shoulder, or it's going to. So shoulder hinge, I'm going to label that, and that way I know it goes shoulder hinge to shoulder to upper arm to elbow to lower arm. So I'm going to take that shoulder hinge and drag it in, right? And we're going to make this obviously substantially smaller than it is. And again, using my front window here, I can kind of see where it's going in to the shoulder joint and where it's still connected here, right? That looks pretty good. We'll make some modifications to that later also. So we've got a basic arm that's going to rotate up and down and back and forth here, and then on a socket here in more of a circular direction, or round, like a rotator cup.